I would love to introduce Tina to the stage.
I want to say, first of all, thank you to the organizers of this conference for having me here. But more importantly, thank you to Lauren for even asking me. I really appreciate that. So who am I? Of course, I had this great introduction, but I am aware of many hats. I've been dubbed that. I do run the drop-in center, but I got some other things going on. I'm a business owner. I own a business called Spot to Spot Mobile Detailing. I am the awareness director for an organization in Humboldt County called EBI. I do the drop-in center. I do all that. I'm a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz, Oregon Indians. May 11th will be a graduate with a Bachelor of Science degree in, yes. I am also honored to tell you that I am a graduate of the Elevate program. Okay, now here we go. Is it on? Next slide. Oh, maybe I got the wrong one. Oh. Awesome. So, okay. I haven't always embraced my culture, but one of the things that I have been taught to do is that we start with the song. Recently, wait a minute, hold on, back up. As I looked at Crane up there, it reminded me to thank my relatives who came. My relative Crane came all the way from Humboldt County to support me, and so I thank her. And my relative Lycan, who lives in Murphy, Oregon, also came to support me. But in Northern California, we have a dance called the flower dance. It's something similar to a quinceanera or whatever. When a young individual comes of age, we have the ceremony. And so I had the honor and privilege to come up with the song. And so I want to sing that now. Ayuhana, 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 ne chithne inkidana, treyuna, nigadas, ayuhana, 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 ayuhana. Oh, so you know what's funny is normally I sound really bad when I sing, but I think that because that's a ceremony song, it's okay. In our culture, there is no difference between your paternal grandmother or your maternal grandmother, and I wanted a song that said that our grandmothers were happy or were proud of my niece for doing her flower dance. And so we couldn't figure out a word. So what that says is your ancestors are proud of you. So I sang that for you today because I want you to know your ancestors are proud of you. I also learned when I started embracing culture that I couldn't tell you who I was without telling you who my family is. And you know, I'll be honest with you. For a long time, as I embraced my culture, I was semi-embarrassed of my mother because my mother is completely Caucasian. That is my mother at the top. Her name was Kathy, and my grandmother there, her name is Virginia Parker. And I'll tell you that they are as cowboy as my father is Indian. And so my father was the late Keith Taylor, and my grandmother is well known in these parts, the late Agnes Baker-Pilgrim. I think out of all her grandkids, I look the most like her. What do you think? So if I leave you with anything today, I'd like to leave you with a way to find how to plant seeds. Because you see, when vulnerabilities come around, those are cracks where traffickers find ways to plant their own seeds. So therefore, this is called the intersection of vulnerabilities and human trafficking. I say that because we're going to talk about a case study today, and this case study had probably more than that's going to be listed on ways that somebody could have been a hero and planted some positive seeds, right? Went the long distance for this person. So I'm going to make a disclaimer. You might see that I only have one arm. I make lots of one-arm jokes. And so it's mandatory to laugh at my arm jokes. I got to tell you a story that happened absolutely yesterday. So my family says that I can't come to Grants Pass without going to Ross. It is the best Ross ever, right? And so I go to Ross, and I'm like fumbling. I got my phone and socks, and I got like, I bought this shirt. I need to tell you that this disclaimer is more about Rebecca. I bought this shirt because I fangirl out, right? What I didn't tell you is that I'm a fitness instructor also, right? And so like you could be teaching, like I've taught for years, right? And you have multiple participants that come in your class, and you're either on a bike or you're doing jumping jacks or burpees. Everything's smooth, you got it. But let your coworkers walk into the room, your other instructors, and want to take your class, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't know how to teach a class. And so I say that because I have been doing this for a long time, but I've never shared space with my sister Rebecca and the rest of my sisters that are in this room. And so I feel a little like, ugh. So I figured if I just got that out, then maybe it would make it okay. All right, here we go. Also, I just want to remind you, if I make an arm joke, it is mandatory to laugh. Oh, back to the guy. So I have all this stuff, and I'm like fumbling, and I said, "Can you just lend me a hand?" And the guy was like, and his customer service was A1. He like put his head down. He was doing his ultimate best not to laugh, and I kept telling him, "Just let it go. It's okay." And he was like. Anyway, so one of the things that you could tell, Native people are inherently storytellers, right? One of the things that I learned as I started embracing culture, when I was in like 6th or 7th grade, we had to do one of these oral essay type things, and I rocked that thing, right? So much so that my next time I got up there to give my essay, I didn't even write it out. Like the teacher said, you have to write it, then you can stand up. And I was like, I don't need that. I got up there and I wrote it out. And so anyway, we are so much storytellers that a lot of times people don't know that when they're telling their stories, they're doing it as a way to heal. And so the number one vulnerability that I want to talk about with Native people and in anyone that I work with is intergenerational trauma. We heard about it a little bit earlier, but this intergenerational trauma comes not from stuff that they've experienced, not from stuff their parents have experienced, not stuff their grandparents have experienced, but their grandparents' grandparents, right? And what happens is this stuff gets passed down just like stories. Right? The written portion of communication that we have now, I hate to tell you, but it's a form of colonization because natives never, ever wrote anything down. They just shared stories, right? So the case study that I'm going to talk to you about today happens to be me. I think I clean up a little bit, right? And so I thought, if I want to talk about vulnerabilities and tell you, like, where your people could have planted seeds in my life or in anybody's life, the best story I could tell you is my own. However, Rebecca always says that just because we live through a fire doesn't make us an arson expert. One of the probably most profound things that I learned while I was doing her online class is that you have to credit people when you're using their stuff. Like you can use it, but credit it. And so I say that because you know what? My story isn't really different than anybody else's. Like, yes, it has a lot of similarities, but what I'll tell you is that there was a disconnect. And so the connection in my life is the connection to land is connecting to culture. And I didn't know that in the very beginning. And so you'll see where this happened. So vulnerability number 2 happened when my parents separated. I was about 2 years old. My parents separated, and I don't remember my father ever being in my life very much. I want to make another disclaimer here that my parents only parented how they were parented. And today I honor and I love them and I respect them. So what you hear here today doesn't mean that, like, I don't respect my parents, I don't love them. They did the best that they could with what they knew how with at the time. By the time I was 18 years old, my adverse childhood experience number was about 9. At first I thought it was 7, but I'll tell you what, while I was fangirling out and overthinking this presentation, I was going back looking at adverse. I was like, you know what, my number's not 7, my number's 9. And so, and when I say I was fangirling, like I overthought this all the time. And I do it all the time, so I redid it. Anyway, I just need you to know that I just originally updated this to number 9. And one of the things that happened when I was young, my mom dated other people constantly. My mom had men in and out of our lives on a regular basis. What I found out later is my mom was also molested as a child. So those individuals that played the father figure in my life also molested me, not one, but 2 of them. And I wrote a poem at the time when I was young, later on when I was in foster care, and that is, the poem went something like this, and this is kind of triggering for those that it may affect. Feel free to walk out. And the poem said, "Why, Daddy? Why did Daddy have to touch me that way? Mommy was there to stay. I turned my head at night. There was a cigarette lit up bright. Why did Daddy have to touch me that way? Now Mommy's not there to stay." I am fortunate to say that when my mom found out, she left. That's not everybody's story. My mom believed me, right? I'll tell you, when I was growing up with my mother, she was very touchy, huggy, feely, and affectionate. Later on, I experienced something completely different. But my mom, believed me. I grew up my mom's only child. And so because I was molested, I had these vulnerabilities. My safety and connection, my safety and security were interrupted. When you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first 2 that need to happen before you can be this well self-esteemed person is the physiological needs need to be there, and also the safety and security need to be there. The minute my mom started introducing these other people into my life, I no longer had the safety and security. So I grew up thinking that I was my mom's significant other's favorite. They were supposed to like me better than her. And so therefore, at a very, very young age, I knew that I was different. I was different, and I would have friends on the playground. I remember being in the 3rd grade, and everybody talking about having a sleepover. And they were like, "It's your turn, Tina, to have a sleepover." And I didn't want anyone to come to my house and have a sleepover because I didn't want anything to happen to my friends like what was happening to me. So before I was I don't even know. I knew I was different. And before I was ever addicted to drugs and alcohol, I was addicted to approval and validation. I think for me, that was the most addicting thing. Today, as you can tell, I was fangirling out. I think that the approval and validation thing still is today. It doesn't go away. It just is not as bad as it used to be, right? It's no secret that in Native communities, that we suffer from alcohol abuse, drug abuse, lack of services to any community, lack of education. And so when all of that happens, it moves an individual like myself to just strive to fit in. And so I wanted to fit in. I wanted to fit in no matter where I was. So I remember that my mom got me this year all the trendy clothes, and I was going to be set, right? But my mom was extremely prejudiced. She was so prejudiced, I was forbidden to have any black friends. Well, I need you to know I'm a little hard-headed. And so my very first friend, of course, was black. And so that was okay. She moved me schools and what have you. But then later on, in about the 6th or 7th grade, maybe I was in the 5th grade, she found out that my very first boyfriend was black. And she moved me from Sacramento, California to Washington, right? And she moved me to Washington. And remember all those clothes that I had that were super trendy and what have you? Washington was 5 years behind where I was just raised at. And so the clothes no longer fit in. And I couldn't fit in on the playground anymore. I couldn't fit in with the friends. So I, again, was looking for ways to fit in. So my mom had the substance in the back of her drawer. And, I was a nosy kid. I don't know if anybody else was, but I was a nosy kid. And so I found this stuff in the back of her drawer that must have followed us for a while. But I figured out it was marijuana, so I decided to take it to school. I decided to take it to school and introduce it to all my friends because I was going to have friends, right? They were going to think I was the cool person. Well, those people told on me. And not only did they tell on me and I got suspended, but the administration decided that it was time for them to expel me and I couldn't come back. So my mom decided that it was time. She couldn't do anything else. And so she sent me to live with my dad in Humboldt County. Talk about culture shock. My mom was completely Caucasian, and my father was a practicing, embraced his culture 100%. My mom said, when you have a conversation with me, you look me at my eyes. That's how I know you're paying attention, right? And so when I got to my dad's and we were talking, he was like, why are you looking at me like that? You're talking to me? And he was like, that's disrespect. So I had a hard time figuring out how to live in a Native household, right? I remember the first time my grandma took us to the mouth of the Klamath and introduced me to seaweed. I have to tell you that I stopped being Native at some sea fish and my ankles. You'll rarely see me go barefooted, ever, hardly ever. And so when I was in Humboldt County, I didn't understand that whole community is basically made up of Native American people, right? And you can't talk about human trafficking without talking about MMIW or MMIR. You can't talk about MMIR without talking about human trafficking, because I think I'd probably bet my left arm on it that probably the reason that 90% of these individuals have gone missing is because they were trafficked somewhere along the way. Just my thought. Humboldt County stats. I want you to know that those red dots on that map signify all the missing individuals right now. The yellow indicates murder cases that have yet to be solved. And so I'm sure, because that's Humboldt County and it's really small, that your guys' stats look similar to this. I couldn't find any, but I know for a fact that it's going on right here. And I need you to know this, and I want you to believe me, because for the longest, you didn't think human trafficking was going on here, correct? Okay. So when I was with my dad, and he was super strict on me and all that stuff, I started running away. So I went to foster care. And I need you to know that Rebecca was talking about systems, right? And I believe that foster care is a system, especially for Native individuals. You see the little girl on the left? That happens to be my granddaughter, and that's the first time that she put on regalia. Do you see how happy she is? She's that's connecting to culture, right? And the little one over on the side is my niece, and her name is Harmony. And that was one of her very many first brush dances that she attended before she came about and had her ceremony. Luckily, the one on the left, unfortunately, the one on the left is in the system, but luckily, thanks to ICWA, she's placed with a Native family. ICWA, for those of you that don't know, stands for Indian Child Welfare Act. And I wish that would have been in place when I was a kid. So in this foster care, I moved from foster care straight to a group home because I was kind of hard-headed, right? And so when I was in a group home, they made the mistake of putting me in a co-ed group home. So I was a teen mom, and I had my daughter. And my daughter and I decided that I was going to move and be on my own. And, I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. My mom was Native, and I was raised with her, but then I knew my mom was Caucasian, and I was raised with her, but I knew there was this Native side, and I just didn't fit in. And so, that song, looking for love in all the wrong place. Am I dating myself? Oh. So I found this guy, and this guy was so handsome. Like, isn't he cute? This guy was so handsome. Like, at the time, I was into Jerry curls, and he had money, he had the car. And the truth of the matter is that he sold dope, and I liked it. I was enamored with that lifestyle, and I was really excited that he carried guns because he was like, oh, he's going to protect me. And so he had me, he said that he knew that I was struggling. He said, well, you know what? I have this, and you can sell this, and you can make some money for yourself. So I began selling dope for him. And then he had me cash some money orders. And so I never asked him. Like, I fully trusted him. I never asked him about the origin of the money orders. So when I took the money orders to the bank, they cashed them, and that night the police had come out to my house looking for me for cash and stolen money orders. So when I was confronted about that, I went to confront them about it. And they told me, just get in the car, don't trip, we're going to re-up. So I got in the car with them, and they drove me to this rural area in between the Sacramento-San Joaquin County line. And they started stripping me. They thought that I was going to narc on them. And they asked me who I was working with. I didn't know at the time what they were talking about, and I thought at any moment, this guy who loves me, who has been taking care of me, was going to protect me. He was going to stop all this chaos and havoc. Well, I need you to know that that did not happen. And I say that with a smile because there was many hours of drawn out stuff where they have me in this car and they have me at gunpoint, and the guy who I am so in love with and crushed on, he is arguing about whether or not his friend is going to shoot me in this car. And they're arguing, and his friend tells me, it's time for you to get out of the car. And I'm like, I'm not getting out. We're in the middle of nowhere. And so he puts the gun to my mouth and he tells me to get out. That night, they stood at the front of the car. I stood in the middle of the car, and they shot me, and they kicked me into a 15-foot embankment. I now have a disability. I feel like I need to fit in. I have a disability, I need to fit in, and I did not realize that made me a number one target until I was attending the JUST conference one year. They said individuals with disabilities and individuals who are minorities or Native American are targeted more than any other individual in this world, and that blew my mind. I did not know. So now I'm going out of my way to feel like I fit in, and I met this other guy. And this guy's name was Jerry. And he took care of me, and he loved on me, and he took care of my kids. I had 2 kids. And he told me that he was going to take care of me until about 6 or 8 months. And then about 6 or 8 months, he said, I've been taking care of you this long, and we're running out of money. But don't trip. I know a way that you can make some money. And so he says, don't worry, I'm going to handle it all. And he leaves and he comes back with some random person, and he tells me to do whatever the person wants. And I did, and when I get through, I've yet to be able, even now that I'm in academia, I've yet to be able to adequately describe the way that I felt when I got through. Disgust, shame, nothing can adequately describe the way that I felt. And he put his hand out and he said, where's the money? And when I handed it to him, he slapped me and he said, I've now laced your boots. That means that he taught me the game. And I worked for him for about another 6 months. And then he went to jail on unrelated charges. So I got away from him. But then what happened? That left me vulnerable and open for another individual. But this individual was different. This individual listened to me. Like, we stayed up all night long, and he talked to me, and he embraced me. He snuggled with me. He took care of me. He knew my hopes, my dreams, my fears, the things that made me worry. He knew that I was my mom's only child, and he knew that I had two kids that had not met. I had two older kids that had not met my two younger kids, right? And so he said he was going to take care of all of that. So with him, I caught a kidnapping charge. I went to prison for kidnapping. And when we got out, we hooked right back up because he said, I'm going to take care of you, babe. I'm going to take care of you. Because, see, what had happened was those nights that we were talking and he knew all about my life, he knew that I had already done this. And so, babe, you can just help us a little bit. Like, it's okay. We could do this. But this time, I'm going to give you a gun. And that way you could take care of yourself. You're not going to get raped. No, you're not going to get robbed because you're going to be able to take care of yourself. So he gave me a gun. And then I get in the car with him after I've turned a date, and he's got this person in the car with him. And I don't know what happened, but anyway, I tell him I'm going to leave, go get something to eat. When I come back, he's no longer with her. She said that we kidnapped them. So I go to prison for kidnapping. I had no idea at the time that he used me as a form of intimidation. Babe, let me see that gun. And so I handed it to him. He said, oh, yeah, we scored on this, huh? I was like, yeah, we did. I like that type of lifestyle, right? And he was like, yeah, this is going to keep you safe. And so he went to hand it back to me, but he said, wait. And he wiped his fingerprints off the gun and then handed it back to me. So when they found the gun, they said, here's the deal. You either plea out to this or we're going to give you 10 years for every bullet and 5 years for the gun. I caught this charge in Texas. And so that meant that there was 65 years because there were 6 bullets in the gun. And so I hurried up and plead out to it. But all it did was let me get right out and go hook up with him again. He said, this time, babe, I'm going to make sure you see your mom. I know you miss your mom. Remember, I told you I was my mom's only child. My mom made me promise that I would never put her in a convalescent home. Well, when I went to prison, my mom had a heart attack and a stroke, and she went to a convalescent home. And so he told me that he was going to make sure that we got there. So he put me on an 18-wheeler, and that was our moving hotel all the way to Washington, to Idaho, so I could see my mom. My mom said, I'm going to give you this car, and I want you to go see your kids and then come back and take me out of this place. So we got down to San Bernardino, and I got my kids, and I put them in a hotel, and he said, now we need to go make some money to continue to pay for the hotel. And that night, I was like a rat race. I could not make enough money to pay for the hotel, to make enough money to make him happy. I could not do anything. But you know what? That was my bottom. Because you see, when you're raised with a certain set of morals, you always have this one set, right? But when you start in this line of work, then you erect your own. Well, okay, that's not that bad. It's part of the grooming process. Oh, well, it's not that bad. Okay, well, my bottom was as long as I never crossed my lifestyle with my family, then it wasn't that bad, right? Well, I left my kids in a hotel, and I never went back. I ended up going to prison again. But in prison is what happened. You know, a lot of times my sisters will say, don't say that. But I need you to know that I didn't get arrested, I got rescued. And I knew that I had finally hit my bottom. And while I was in prison, I met this lady named Josetta Bear. And she would be out on the track, and she was like Forrest Gump. She was out there, she was just running and running. And I asked her one day, Josetta, what are you doing? And she said, I'm training for a marathon. I said, a marathon? What is that? And she said, well, you run. And I said, how far is it? She said, 26.2 miles. And I was like, are you crazy? Well, at the time, fitness was not a part of my life, right? And so I thought, well, let me see what this chick's like. What's the thrill about this? So I started walking the long side in prison and running the corners. And then I'd walk the other side and then run the corner. And then until it got comfortable and I was able to run a mile. And then I was able to go up to about 3 miles. And I want to tell you that when I got to 3 miles, I was like, oh my gosh, I just ran 3 miles. And people were like, all right, good. I'm like, you don't understand. Like, it was new to me. But Josetta also took me to the sweat lodge in the prison system. And I want you to know that I had an ulterior motive for going to the sweat lodge. The reason is my father was instrumental in erecting the sweat lodges in prison, and I wanted some way to connect to him, right? Problem is I go to sweat on Saturday, and they'd say, don't go back over there to that place on Sunday. You're crossing 2 medicines. And then I go to church on Sunday, and they tell me, don't go back over there to that place on Saturday, because you know what? You're opening yourself up to other spirits. But you know when I told you I was hard-headed? Like, I needed that. But what I really needed was to connect to culture. I needed that. My DNA called me, right? And so I had to change habits. Even when, like, I would get out of prison before, the first person I'd say, I'd be like, excuse me, can I bum a cigarette? And so when I got out this time, it was almost like habit. It was like, excuse me, could you buy me a soda? And so that change started on the inside of prison, and it continued while I was out on the outside. And then I ran into this guy named Steve Tanner. You see the guy in the blue? He was San Bernardino County Sheriff. He knew my whole entire story, but he saw a way to plant a seed in my life, right? I got out and I didn't have a desire to get a job. I didn't have a desire to get an education. I only wanted to run a marathon. You see, Josetta Bear got out before me, and unfortunately, she came back before she was able to run a marathon. And so I adopted her desire, and I wanted to run a marathon. And this guy took me to this place called the Loma Linda Lopers in Southern California. And they're a veteran marathon running club. And they helped me with shoes, and they helped me with the entrance into the marathon, and they helped me with the hotel. They were planting seeds for me. They were making connection. They knew my whole entire story. There was a part where I was training for this marathon where I still had an ankle bracelet on my ankle, right? I mean, he knew my whole entire story, and he still, like, tucked me under his wing. And so I'm a firm believer that exercise is the most underutilized antidepressant in the world. One of the ways that I feel like today that we can not only connect people back to their culture, but connect them to exercise, and we might be able to minimize some of the issues that we have. Exercise, I have this theory. I have this theory that our brain is like a bowl of sand, right? I'm not a scientist, but this is my theory. And the first initial traumatic experience that happens to you goes through that sand, right? And then every traumatic experience thereafter just continues to go through. And because we're majority water, then that water starts flowing through, right? And what happens, it just gets deeper and deeper, right? Well, when you start exercising and that bowl of sand starts moving, you start doing this, right? And it allows that water to go to other parts of the brain. I don't know. I'm in academia, but I'm like not sure about that. I really want to just partner with somebody. Vulnerabilities can be a place where you can plant seeds, right? Be the Steve Tanner in people's lives. Be someone who doesn't care about how bad that individual may appear to be. You don't know all the trauma that they've already experienced. They might want to fight you. They might want to cuss you out, right? But be that person that needs they can feel that I don't even know what I'm going to say. Be that hero. There we go. Be that hero. And so with that, I want to go back over the places that people could have planted seeds. There was generational trauma. There was a parenting separation, right? There was a mom and dad, mom dated other people. There was safety and security, prejudice, relocating, being suspended from school, foster care, teen mom, searching for belonging. And I told Lauren I wasn't going to talk about my kids because it's a sore subject. I told you I have 4 kids, right? One of the highest problems in Native American country is suicide. This was the first time that me and my 4 kids were ever reunited. And they accepted me and loved me. And I told you I do this work, right? And I'm able to help all these other people. But 3 years ago, I wasn't able to help my son. The one in the red hat committed suicide. And so we were reconnected, and he did see me sober. And he does still see me sober, right? And so in the Native community, if you're planting seeds, because you're surrounded by Native community in this area, if you're planting seeds in those Native Americans' lives, those youth's lives, whatever it might be, connecting them to culture, exercise, whatever, when you connect them to culture, then you get someone who stands up in front of you like this and is able to make jokes about their arm and able to put a face to their still resiliency in those young people. This is my family at, I don't know what year, but yeah, we're all like a rainbow of colors, right? And so it was really important to me. I asked my grandma about her 111s on her chin. And she told me, well, you would ask your mother, but since your mother's not Native, you'd have to ask your grandmother. And I said, oh, okay. So later, Grandma, well, what would that look like? Could I get my 111s? Yeah, you're living a good life. You can do that. Well, you see, the mantra in my head told me I wasn't good enough. I didn't belong. And so I constantly, I don't know enough about culture yet. Oh, I'm not dark enough. I'm too pale. Oh, I haven't done enough. Oh, I haven't serviced enough. And so this committee in my head continued to tell me that I wasn't good enough to get my 111s, right? And so even though I had permission, I had done it the right way. I had gifted my grandmother after she gave me permission. I contemplated it. I was still living in a good way. And then I had the honor and privilege of attending 2 other people who were really special in my life get their 111s. And so I was out jogging one day, and it was about 3 years after my grandma passed, and it was almost like she came and was jogging next to me. And I was thinking about my 111s, and I'm like, I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. She said, Tina! You go to church to get ready. You don't get ready, then go to church. I said, oh, wow, okay. And so what I did is I contacted someone who does traditional 111s, and I made an appointment. In June of last year, I got an appointment to get my 111s, and I invited those same 2 people. And those same 2 people came, and one of them said, her name is Yvonne, she said, what's your mantra? I said, I need a mantra? She said, oh yeah, you're going to need a mantra. And I said, oh, okay. So my mantra was, I belong. And I'll tell you, and so I tell you that every time I stop saying that mantra in my head, that ish hurt. But the minute I continued to say it in my head, that I belong, it was all right. It didn't hurt. And they sang songs for me. And so today, that's why I stand up here in a basket cap and a ribbon skirt and a necklace that was made for me, and I sing a song. And I want you to know, you guys are the first person I ever sing a song with. With that, I close with my information because I, too, represent an organization, and I, too, can't run off of no money, But if you ever have some information that you want to connect somebody with, and they're in Humboldt County, and you need a resource or a network in that area, there I am. Thank you.